Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Dylbozer's Den. With you as always is me, the Dylbozer. Today we're going to be discussing the newest release from Arizona's own Gatecreeper, Dark Superstition, their first release on Nuclear Blast Records. The band signed to Nuclear Blast at the tail end of 2021 after spending many years on underground metal label Relapse Records. When I found out the band was signing to Nuclear Blast, I already had a pre-existing notion that the band was going to have a little bit more distribution, a little bit more promotion on their end. That's not to say Relapse doesn't do a great job with that, but this is the first release in 5 years. It's the first full-length release in 5 years. Their most recent release was an EP called An Unexpected Reality through Closed Casket Activities in 2021, and that was a blending of short, really fast songs and a really long Death Doom song, showing what this band was capable of aside from what its traditional sound is, which is a very pounding, pummeling, hard kind of death metal styling. This band definitely fits in vein on a lot of bills with hardcore bands or hardcore festivals. I've had a chance to see this band. I believe it's 3 times, maybe twice at this point. Once with Inner Arma and Pallbearer, and another time with Power Trip and Cannibal Corpse to show the differing kind of lineups this band has done. And this band's done a lot of touring with varied acts. So if you get a chance, hopefully you'll get to see some of these new songs played live as well as some of the classics. We've been waiting 5 years for this record. Production has been handled by Kurt Ballou of Converge fame, of God City Studios, God City Instruments, GCI Instruments. The record sounds fantastic. It sounds like a Kurt Ballou production to where you get this organic sound of what the band truthfully sounds like. But what you get isn't just a traditional death metal record. It's starting to blend some of the sounds that we heard earlier this year with the Upon Stone record. It seems like a few bands are really wanting to bring back the late 90s, early 2000s Gothenburg styling of death metal, In Flames, Dark Tranquility, At the Gates, that sort of thing. This album is much more than just a Gothenburg rehash or a Gothenburg tribute. It sounds like Gatecreeper have taken a step up. But let's dig into the lineup. Production obviously was handled by Mr. Kurt Ballou. Alan Duchess did the mastering of this. The artwork was done by artist Lena Richter, who works at Diamonds and Rust Tattoo and Art, located somewhere in Germany. The artwork is very reminiscent of a lot of the early 90s death metal records or mid 90s death metal records, adds to the vein, but it also showcases the influence on this record from the band's own home state of Arizona with some of the superstitions from that area of the country. You've got cactus, or is it cacti?
It's cacti!
And some spiders associated with the desert and kind of going with their theme of this band. You've got Chase Mason on vocals. You've got Eric Wagner on guitars, the Dark Cowboy. You've got Metal Matt Arabello on drums. And you have 2 new members joining for their first full-length release with the band, which is Israel Garza, also of Judiciary. You also have bassist Alex Brown debuting on here. You've got essentially 2 new members with the band. Had a couple lineup changes throughout the years. But with this album, as I said, first for Nuclear Blast, first full-length in 5 years since Deserted. It's been some time. Yeah, we had a global pandemic. Life goes on. Different things happen. We did get some singles earlier this year setting up for the record. We had Caught in the Treads, The Black Curtain, which is the track that really got everybody's heads kind of spinning. And then we had Masterpiece of Chaos, just 3 great singles already released prior to their album. I don't want to gloss over the fact that the band also worked with Dismember's own Fred Etzby for the record as well. And there's definitely some tones on this record that lean more towards the Dismember realm. This band isn't just an HM2 clone band. They have a lot more going on in this record than I think a lot of people expected. Gatecreeper really, I think, ushered in this new modern take of old school death metal. You wouldn't have bands like Frozen Soul, Undeath, the list goes on, without Gatecreeper jumping in. Sanguisugabogg, even. You wouldn't have that without Gatecreeper kind of setting in motion what you have. I think this band deserves a lot of credit for bringing that into it. And with this album, you get a bit of a change to that old style. Everything is catchier. Everything seems to be more refined. Everything seems to be more focused in songwriting, hooks. There's a lot of them on this record. But anyway, let's just dig into this. Opening track, Dead Star, opens up like late 90s, early 2000s, kind of Gothenburg. Definitely makes me think of like Clayman era In Flames, Pinball Map, Only for the Weak, tracks like that. It has a great pop song structure, and it's got just these great solo breaks into it, and it still stomps and pounds like classic Gatecreeper. It's not a complete departure from what the band would normally do, but the band is definitely delving into different influences on this album. We go into the next track, Oblivion, which is just a Swedish D-beat kind of bliss of an opening track. One thing I noted in this track is that Chase sounds like he's finally found his own niche. It's this great low mid scream that has developed into his own style. It's not just these kind of cavernous sounding death metal vocals, which those are great, but I feel like he really has set himself away from the pack on this album. There's a great distorted bass break in here that is just nasty and dense. It's almost so distorted it loses a little bit of that low end and blends right in with the guitars. Works really well for this album. The great thing about this song too is that it's really compact. It also makes this album so enjoyable. You know, sometimes we gripe about albums being over, a certain length of time. If a song is good, it doesn't matter what length it is. However, it's always nice to get kind of that short 35-minute record that you can just put on and go, oh man, I want to listen to it again. You've only spent an hour listening to an album twice. And this is one of those records. I think it clocks in at about 37 and a half minutes. That kind of goes back to their hardcore ethos and how they're promoting and the types of tours they're doing. Short songs, keep the attention span going. And just that way they can just hit the crowd in a live set as hard and as heavy and as quickly as they can and just have people losing their fucking minds. There's a riff at 2 minutes and 15 seconds in this that is absolutely perfect. We go on to The Black Curtain, which is the second single for this record. It's definitely melodic, like immediately. I got thoughts of Him as soon as I heard this, particularly the Razorblade Romance album. This track is melodic as fuck. The bass moves the song. I feel it kind of carries it, moves it forward. Huge Hymn vibes, as I said. Huge melodic kind of Euro metal track. Another thing about this album is it's like festival tracks to me. I feel like this band could be playing like Wacken or something like that, or some of those huge open air festivals that a lot of the European bands were playing in the late 90s, early 2000s before we started to get a scene over here in the States for bands like that. Just a great, catchy, singable, hummable, hooky song. I saw a lot of hate online for this track throughout, and it's like, hey guys, it's to a point now that I truthfully believe that the hardcore and punk crowd are more acceptable of change in any type of genre, as opposed to some of like the denim clad metal fans. It's a bummer, but it was expected, Get over it. Things change. Bands want to progress. Not every band is going to be Slayer, AC/DC, or Cannibal Corpse. That's not to say those bands didn't do it either, because they did. We go on to Masterpiece of Chaos. This is a standout track for me. Great riff opens this track up. Just a mid-tempo, just banger. Nasty drum fills kind of going throughout the intro. Just a circle pit worthy track. This is like the Obituary track, right? Just the mid-tempo, just moshing banger. Maybe something very similar to like Grave on here in that vein of death metal. Grave's Soulless album is always a fantastic one, and I can get that vibe from this. Obituary, probably Cause of Death. Wailing guitars in the background of this thing. It's just great, straightforward, straight ahead death metal. We go on to Superstitious Visions. Opens up with a great melodic riff that sounds like something off of a CKY record. Infiltrate, Rebuild, Destroy is always a favorite of mine. If this band had existed in the early 2000s, I would not be surprised if they would have ended up on, some sort of episode of Viva La Bam or some sort of Tony Hawk's Underground soundtrack or anything like that. This is some skate fucking music. And I'm not even a skater. I am too much of a fucking clumsy bastard. It's melodic. There's these great down-picked rhythms throughout. There's a fucking cowbell in the track. I mean, you can't complain there. It's tasteful. It's subtle. Just fucking works. It seems the guitars are even cleaner and more pronounced on this record. Maybe they dialed back some of the gain a little bit, or it's just the mixing and the mastering of it. But they're punchier. They're less of like this kind of huge wall of sound with the guitars on this record. I think there's even some tambourine on here. I'd love to know if that's true or not. Then we go on to A Chilling Aura, which is my favorite track on this record. Just a fucking great riffer. Makes me think of Emperor, kind of in the Nightside Eclipse era. Dissection kind of going on with that Gothenburg, that Swedish kind of sound with like the somber lane. It definitely shows the songwriting of this band has just gotten that much more advanced. I love the songwriting of this record. It definitely feels like the band has just honed in on its craft, blending not only their pounding version of death metal, but also some of the Gothenburg, some of the Euro influences, some thrashy influences like on this track. Personal favorite on the whole album, and we're not even complete with the record. Then we go to the first single released for the album, Caught in the Treads. This is probably the most straightforward song on the album, I feel. Definitely an easy way to segue into the record. It sounds a little bit more like Dismember, in my opinion. It even has some Amon Amarth stuff, something off like Twilight of the Thunder God, Fate of Norns, one of those records. It's just a great bouncy Gatecreeper track. This is what you want from this type of band who is known for being such a hard touring live band. Then we get on to Flesh Habit, which after a couple listens to this, I've heard more and more stuff come out on this track that I didn't expect to hear. There's fucking hand claps in there. And I didn't hear it till like the very last listen of the record. And they're layered in there, and it's in these little breaks here and there. There's fucking hand claps. But there's a great distorted chorused bass intro, huge riff throughout. The melodies are back on this track. This could very well be the most melodic track on the record. And it just ends up with this great pounding bridge in this song. Segue into Mistaken for Dead. Now, I know everything is influenced by every single thing. It's hard to find something new. I don't think this was intentional, but once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. I believe that there is a riff in this song that is reminiscent of Fleetwood Mac's The Chain. I don't think it was intentional. It's just a simple minor, a minor chord progression that happens. It's a minor scale note that happens. You can't beat it. It's part of an E minor scale. It's just there. It's the two notes that arrive and it just sounds like The Chain. And now every time I hear it, I can't unhear it. That's not to say the track isn't fucking great, because it is. A heavy ass intro, circle pit riffs all throughout. This is the cardio track. This is the one you put on when you're running on the treadmill or running down the highway, or after you've got done pulling a B&E and you're running out of somebody's fucking house and the cops are chasing you. This is that kind of fucking track that would enter. Then we go into the final track, which is Tears Fall from the Sky. Huge Paradise Lost influences right out the gate. Massive, massive, massive track. Very, very much a throwback to the Unexpected Reality track, Emptiness, which was extremely long and was so cool to hear the band dig into something like that. And it's also cool to hear something like that again. I would have loved to have heard the band kind of go more in that direction. I fucking love this as well, as long as we still get samplings of that. There's these great harmony guitars throughout this whole song that make me think of Cradle of Filth and Amphetamine. Just old school guitar harmonies. It's there, but just the way they're phrased makes me think of that record. That's a band that gets shit on a lot. It's a lot of people's introduction to black metal. Hey, sue me. There's this huge breakdown style riff at the 2 minute and 40 second mark that doesn't really come back. It's just there. And it just shows like, hey, we may be doing something different, but we're still Gatecreeper. This is still it right out the gate. The band has this ability just to blend its old styles, its new styles together, which is a fantastic return from a bit of an absence of releases, but it also shows the band can end up doing more than what they were just known for doing. This is a band that nobody needs to sleep on. Dig back in, enjoy this record, listen to it, enjoy it, have a good fucking time.